Hey everyone, Chantal Girardi here from Online Business Marketing, and today we are talking about legal contracts and T's and C's and things that you may need within your business to help you. So I've done things the South African way many times in my life, and I will share my first story. And I actually did win, which is pretty good. But when I had my health, wellness and fitness center, I had a subcontractor working for me, and I'd gone and Googled another subcontractor's contract, basically made it my own, got this person to sign it. And she tried to break the contract, I think 6 months before she was supposed to. And I ended up taking her to, I think it's QCAT, and they sat down and she went, "Oh, look, I can't pay for it. I've changed my mind." They said, "Well, you can't really change your mind." They said, "Chantal, moving forward, you really should get a lawyer to look over your contracts." However, she did sign this and she was very much aware of what she was doing. So they kind of met it in the middle and they said, "Look, you'll have to pay for 3 months, 3 months out of the 6 months." So that was a pretty good win. But I do completely value the whole process of having forms, because you always get those dickheads that always come back and just try to push the boundaries or just try to do the not so nice things. So, and we had one recently, actually. They signed up for our social media management program. And in there it says, look, you can either pay a setup fee or you can commit to staying for a minimum of 20 weeks. They said 20 weeks. I forgot to send the form through to him to sign. I just processed the whole thing. And he's on about week 12 and he's like, "Nah, look, I've decided to shut my business down." And I'm like, "I don't want to work with you anyway." But I just went, I didn't send him the contract. It was just something I needed to automate so that it just automatically happens. But I have had issues with that as well in Xero. So if there is a way to get people to tick and sign something in Xero, that would be really helpful. Jeanette, that's my question today, if I can have that. But for the rest of our live audience, they have gone and introduced their business and spoken about the type of contracts they would use in their business. And Jeanette is going to not only share some amazing, awesome content today for both service and product-based businesses, but she's also going to answer some of the questions that have been previously asked as well. So thanks so much, everyone. And we will go to Jeanette.
Hi everybody, Jeanette Jifkins from ONYX Legal. We are a corporate and commercial law firm. We're based in North Lakes in Queensland, but we do look after clients locally, nationally and internationally. And we've been dealing specifically in the online space since about 2010. So we understand the online components of doing business as well as the offline and how that can impact what you do. Now, there are loads of questions that you all have, and each of them could be addressed separately in like a short advice session. So what I'll try and do is wrap some ideas together and give them to you, and hopefully they will help you out. So I'll go with quick, easy ones first. Trademarks. Trademark applications and registrations is only done through IP Australia, and it is in Australia, and it is unique to Australia. So when you register a trademark, it protects your trademark in Australia. It doesn't protect it internationally. That's a whole other process. You have to register it in each country to get protection in each country. Logos, short names, bylines may be capable of trademark protection because they're little. Things you write, blog posts, that kind of thing, they're copyright protection, which is a whole different area of law. Okay, so they are still part of intellectual property, but trademarks and copyright are two different things. So essential oils, your label, you may be able to trademark the way the label appears. Who else asked about trademarks? Somebody else asked about trademarks. Oh, buying a business. Transferring trademarks is pretty simple and easy. They are registered for 10 years, so just check when the registration's due for renewal and make sure that you've got a little bit of time to make that happen. You just fill in a form and lodge it with IP Australia to get a transfer of that with the transfer of business. Trademarks, you cannot trademark generic words and generic explanations and things like that. So Bakery North Lakes is never going to get trademark protection. And I've got a client came through this morning. They've received a cease and desist letter from someone saying that they have to hand over their domain name and everything. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. They do not have to hand over their domain name. Their domain name is a generic description of what they're providing on their website. And the person who is claiming they have a brand and trademark and everything is talking through their hat. So we will be dealing with that on behalf of the client and responding to that letter and basically saying no. So with trademarks, we have a standard format response that we send to people who inquire about trademarks, which explains in a bit of detail the limits and the opportunities, and that's the kind of thing you want to be looking at before you register one. You do have IP Australia fees, and they vary between $250 and $550 per mark per class, and there are 46 classes. However, you normally register in one or two. Okay, and the variations between 250 and 550, it's a separate thing. It's about the way you describe your products and services. But yeah, if you've got any specific trademark questions or you need some assistance in registering a trademark or responding to an adverse report when you've tried to register a trademark yourself, we can do those things. All right, I'll label details on essential oils and product safety for kids' educational things. They're two things. So labels on essential oils are potentially a TGA, therapeutic goods thing. So if there's most essential oils are natural products and they're not protected, you just need to be aware of what other ingredients are going into the essential oils, and if there's any protected products going into those oils, in which case you've got TGA obligations, so therapeutic goods obligations. We have assisted people who do have therapeutic goods problems to prepare labels and everything and put safety warnings and all of that sort of stuff on their product labels. In terms of selling candles, we expect you to show some common sense in using our candles disclaimer on your website. That should cover just about everything. There are some court cases. We are fortunately not as bad as America, where, you know, packets of peanuts have to say contains peanuts. That's just ludicrous. We have some court cases here in Australia, for example, Otto elevators were successful in a court case because the court said, well, people should actually look where they're going when they enter into a lift. You expect people to look at the gap between the floor and the lift, and if they trip over, it's their own fault. So yeah, there is a level of common sense in Australia. You don't have to have every disclaimer under the sun on your products and services. You do, if you think that there is likely to be reactions or anything like that, you do need to make sure that's covered. In terms of kids stuff, just double check the product safety requirements on ACCC. So ACCC is the Australian Consumer and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. They govern product safety in Australia, and every Christmas they prosecute loads and loads of people for importing products without the appropriate product safety standards. If that ever happens and you get done importing products that don't meet safety standards, those products get destroyed, you get fined, you never get any money for them, all these sorts of things. So be aware of and check ACCC product safety standards. And if you have any concerns about that, ring them. They're really helpful people. But don't be trying to import or sell things where you haven't checked that. Children's products are a huge red flag in that area. Okay, terms and conditions on websites. Yes, you can put just about anything you want in terms and conditions. The way we do it with people providing products or services is we generally say have your terms of use on your website. Now, terms of use cover such things as the governing law is Queensland, Australia. If you want to pick a fight with me, come to Queensland, Australia, or wherever you happen to be, New Zealand. And also copyright. notices. Here's what rules we have around using any of the content we have on our website, and your privacy. Here's what we do to, protect your privacy. And then if you're in any sort of risky industry or regulated industry, so financial services, you would have your disclaimer on there. Now, in terms of financial services, you would also have somewhere on your website your financial services license number, and some specific details around the information on this website is not financial advice, it's general information only, don't take any actions, blah, blah, blah. That would be on your website. We've got a couple of clients in the financial services space. So terms of use is what we'd normally have on the website. Your terms and conditions of services. So whatever people sign to take up your products or services, generally what we say is put them on a page on your website so they're easy to link to things. But in terms of providing them to people, what you do, Chantel, your specific question around Xero, is if you're issuing quotes, you have a specific link in your quote that says this quote is provided subject to our terms and conditions. Please read them here. And upon accepting our quote, you will be accepting these terms and conditions. And just put the link in the quote. And then as soon as they hit accept the quote on Xero, they've accepted everything that's written on that quote, which includes your terms and conditions because they're linked. Now, you've got to make sure that link works. And you've got to make sure that link goes to the most current terms and conditions. So this is another thing about your terms and conditions in any of your contracts. What I do recommend is, because you should have them reviewed every couple of years to make sure they remain legally compliant and consistent with your business, have a last updated date on them somewhere. So what we tend to do is put at the top of the page, we've got the title, and then immediately under that, last updated, and put a date. And the reason you do that is because when you're using standard form terms and conditions, you don't want to have to check every single person's terms and conditions and save every single person's terms and conditions to whatever files you keep on that purchaser. What you want to do is say they purchased in this time frame, therefore those terms and conditions apply. That's what I need to take to the court if I need to respond to or initiate a dispute. So click wrap contracts or electronic contracts, the way it works is anybody who ticks a box and says, I agree to the terms and conditions, it is the same as signing a document. And if you tick the box without reading them, you're agreeing to them whether you've read them or not, which is the same as signing a document you don't read. You are bound by the terms if you sign it. So you can get people to tick boxes or you can get them to sign it. With the quote, the action of accepting the quote is the same as ticking a box. So what it is being able to demonstrate this is our standard procedure. And in fact, we would not have commenced work if they had not ticked the box. And this is what their quote looks like. Yeah, go Chantel.
Thank you. So we do that. So on the website, for example, it's easy because they can just tick and it says terms and conditions and it's a hyperlink so they can do that. Mm-hmm. But when I don't send a quote, I send an invoice.
Yeah, invoice is too late. Okay, so every contract will only apply if it is entered into before the point of purchase. So the rules around contracts are you've got to have offer, acceptance, consideration, and intent to create legal relations. So your intent to create legal relations is to say, we have this product or service that we're making available to you. If you want to buy it, here's how you buy it. Consideration is the doing of something or the paying of money. And so your offer and your acceptance, your offer is to make it available through the website. They tick, they go to a page where they can purchase now. They tick a box to say they agree to the terms. That's their acceptance. And then the actual ticking the box is the consideration as well as, and then there's payment of money usually on top of that. So if you don't have that and you send it with an invoice, it's too late because the terms and conditions do not apply because the contract's completed.
Yeah, the problem is just with Xero. So the problem is that it's a two-step process because a quote doesn't automatically turn into an invoice.
No, I know, but that's okay.
So,
What you got to do is, because we've formatted this as well. So we have quotes now that we provide because we have a trust account. So trust accounts are very separate from general accounts. We can't send an invoice for money in trust. We can only send a quote, and then people put money in trust, and then we have to send an invoice. So you convert the quote into an invoice. But what it means is when you design your quote in Xero, you have to have that writing at the bottom, and then you send them the quote and they tick the quote. It goes as a draft quote. When they tick it, it becomes a quote. So that's just the Xero process. The other way to do it is to make sure at the beginning of the relationship, somehow they have these terms and conditions, which is either by ticking the box before the point of purchase or you sending it to them before the point of purchase. But they don't have to read it, and you don't have to require them to read it, and you don't have to make sure they've read it before the point of purchase. You just have to make sure they have the opportunity to read it before the point of purchase. So one of the ways, it's better to bring it directly to their attention, because if you put it on your website and you don't direct them to it, then how do you know they've even seen it? And I've seen people hide terms and conditions and privacy and stuff like that on their website and expect it to be compliant. Never going to be compliant. The courts are very strong on, if you try and disguise or hide information, don't then expect to be able to rely upon it. Clinton, you got a question?
There you go. Yeah, one of the things that just kind of triggered my mind was with when we do our quotes is obviously we have exclusions. So obviously being a plumbing, gas and drain laying and heating business, we are obviously in construction, things change consistently. And in my quotes, it gets to the point I almost have like a whole page of exclusions. We exclude, whatever it is, I don't know, dewatering a trench or this and that. And you end up with like a massive list. How does it stack up when in the quote you try and label out we intend to, or whatever it is, we've priced this based on the following conditions, and you kind of label out as much. And I guess how does it come, like sometimes things change within the job because for whatever reason you don't see
unforeseen circumstances. Yeah, we just write terms and conditions that match that. So rather than trying to put every single thing in your quote, what you do is you put every single thing in a set of terms and conditions. And then in your quote, you say, then you put your exclusions in your quote. So everything in your terms and conditions applies unless you've said in your quote, this won't apply. And that way it makes it easier, and it gives you the opportunity to cover everything off, because we worked with industrial and we work with plumbing and electrical and all of those sorts of things. And in any construction, like we've just done some supplier expectations as a binding agreement for a client that installs, they install industrial venues, and we've had to be careful in how we construct their supplier terms, because there's a whole lot of things around the responsibilities of the subbies they bring in to do the work, including workplace health and safety and leaving the site clean and safe and all of those sorts of things. And one of the things they've had to implement is say, if we've got a subbie on site, you've got to give us a video and or photographs of the completed work and the clean site before we'll pay you. So you can write anything you want in terms and conditions. It's just got to be fair. So it can be very clear, it can be very blunt, as long as it's not unfair. So we've got a whole thing around unfair contract terms, and the penalties have just increased out of the stratosphere. So for a company, a PTY Ltd, the fines can go up to $50 million or a third of revenue. So they're quite significant, and individuals get very substantial fines as well. That all comes into place for small business in Australia. It's a bit different in NZ, but in Australia, the unfair contract term provisions and penalties come in place as of 10 November this year. So if you've got standard form contracts that you use repeatedly, If they have any provisions that a court could deem to be unfair, you could potentially be penalised for them come 10 November. Now, you're all small businesses, so you're unlikely to be first off the rank for the ACCC sues, but this is going to be an increasing area of prosecution into the future, so be aware of it. Things that are unfair contract terms are one-sided, stuff that's one-sided, stuff that puts obligations on your customer but not on you, all of those sorts of things. But if you need any of that reviewed, by all means, let us know. Collaboration agreements. Yes, you should always have any sort of collaboration agreement in writing. We usually draft them as joint venture agreements, revenue share agreements, things like that. The reason I say you should have this in writing, at the very least, do a bullet point list of what you'd have agreed between you, because collaborations go wrong. They go pear-shaped. And then you've got a he said, she said type argument going on, and it's just not fun. What you want is a level of clarity and an opportunity to resolve things quickly at the end of a relationship. So it's best to have them documented. All of the things that go wrong, like I know what you're saying about finding contracts and you're happy with them because somebody else's lawyers put them together. I have a former business broker that I work with who insists on drafting documents and then sending them to me to be checked. And they are always rewritten quite substantially. And he understands contracts, but whatever he sends me invariably has contradictions in it, which instead of providing extra protection, removes the protection because of the contradiction. So just be aware, if you are being your own lawyer in these situations, you are potentially putting your business at risk, and you need to weigh up that against what losses, you've just got to know what your risk appetite is, and if you are happy to take the risk with what you've prepared, then go for it. If you feel your business is earning more than you can afford to lose, then I do recommend you get them reviewed by a lawyer. Event agreements. Someone was mentioning that they do events. The kind of things that you need to be aware of for events are ensuring safety of the venue and insurance. Now, insurance has been raised by a couple of people. Insurance is not a catch-all, and it doesn't solve every problem. There are plenty of carve-outs in insurance where you may not be covered. So unless you have taken the time to read your PDS, your product disclosure statement, and actually understood it, because believe me, even as a lawyer, it doesn't mean I understand what they say. I work with with insurance brokers, and I work with insurance brokers on purpose, because an insurance broker will read the PDS, they will understand it, they aim to understand your business, and they are the best people to deal with in any situation if you have to make a claim on your insurance. And they will also caution you if the insurance is unlikely to cover the situation you're trying to get covered. So just be aware that your insurance does not solve every problem. This is part of the reason we have terms and conditions. Terms and conditions can actually reduce your insurance premiums if they're properly put together. So when you're doing an event, the key things are safety. When it's an event around health or well-being, we normally require, or what we recommend to our clients, is that you have like a participant disclaimer when people physically come to an event. And in that participant disclaimer, and actually we've done this for online events as well, some of the things we suggest to be included are that when you're attending this event or participating in this event, that you are responsible for your own physical and mental well-being, because particularly in the mental health space, wherever there's any sort of well-being things happening, we've had a number of clients where people have not actually been in the right frame of mind to participate, and they have a break or they're triggered by something and it's all the client's fault. So in a disclaimer for attending those events, it specifically says that if you don't feel you have the appropriate mental or physical health to participate, don't participate. Basically, take responsibility for your own actions. And in terms of disclaimers, this is one of the things you should be thinking about as well. Disclaimers are not just about what you are trying to disclaim responsibility for. You can use them to highlight to your customers or clients what they are responsible for. So, you know, you are responsible for your own health and safety. You are responsible for, you know, if you're hiring a room, bringing or, you know, having your own insurance in place, having your own equipment, you know, all of those sorts of things. So just in terms of events, we usually have some provisions around cancellations, rescheduling, people seeking refunds, particularly if you've got a limited number of people attending an event and you just can't, you know, within a certain number of days of the event, there's no way you're going to get your money back. It should be clear in your terms and conditions for the event what the cutoff date is for refunds, and when refunds are no longer available because your costs remain fixed. So things like that are important for events. Somebody mentioned something about standing up in a court of law, making sure that their agreement stands up in a court of law. I can tell you now, what stands up in a court of law depends on the day of the week and the decision maker. When I first started legal practice, I spent my first 5 years as a litigator. I was good at it. I got tired of banging people's heads together, and litigation is one of those areas where the lawyers win, nobody else does. Because what happens is we get the great fun opportunity to craft a fun argument that we think will win and try and persuade the court, but it is dependent on who the decision maker is on the day, and they are human beings. They have bad days too. You know, they turn up to work hungover or with migraines or, you know, pissed off at their partner because of some argument they had that morning, or they tripped over the dog or whatever. They are human beings and they have bad days too, and they are not necessarily going to agree with you. So the decision maker, and also the way in which the argument's presented on the day. So if you're representing yourself and you get flustered, or you've got someone representing you and they take a whole different course of action. I've actually had a barrister in the Supreme Court who I wanted to sack on the spot because the judge was telling him what the judge wanted to hear and he just ignored the judge, and I wanted to slap him. You know, and then he had the hide to tell me after we left the court, after losing, that the judge is an idiot. And well, no, the judge was fine. You missed it. Anyway, I was a junior lawyer then, and I didn't actually have the kahunas to sack him at the time, but I would now. Anyway, so just nothing is ever going to stand up in court. Nothing, you know, you can't have that expectation. You can't rely on it to that. Nothing's ever watertight. Nothing is ever not going to be challenged. And we do this in employment law all the time. People say, how do I avoid an unfair dismissal claim? You can do all of the right processes, all of the right thing, but you cannot predict human behaviour. And if someone wants to start a proceeding, they will. And in the Fair Work jurisdiction, it's easy because it's free for a complainant. So, you know, nothing's ever going to be watertight. What you've got to do is prepare yourself to be in the best and strongest position you can be in, and to have faith in what you do. You know, you need to understand the way in which you do business, how that is fair, how you look after your customers, all of this sort of thing, because that's where your credibility comes in. And if you do ever have to stand up in court, you become the most believable witness. So therefore the most persuasive person in the room, you know. So contracts are about relationships. Maintain the relationships and the contract looks after itself. That's probably the strongest thing I can say. Someone was saying about the WOTSO room hire. I haven't looked at the WOTSO room hire. It avoids the legalities of rental. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship that you're creating. So what it is from a legal position, there is a lease or there is a license to use premises. A license is non-exclusive, a lease is exclusive. A lease has a whole lot of different obligations. What you're talking about is a license to use premises. So it doesn't get away from the legalities, it just changes the nature of the legalities. So just have an awareness of that. Ambassadors and products, wholesalers. We're talking about wholesaling products. So we've done a number of distribution agreements in the past. What you need to be aware of is if you are wholesaling products to a distributor, some of the key things that people miss are reputational damage. If you've got a distributor who's doing something that you want nothing to do with, you don't want your name associated with, you need to have some terms and conditions in that contract that says you can pull the product and their ability to resell it immediately. Storage is another big thing. If you've got distributors, if they are actually storing any of your products or equipment, products or anything that you're wanting them to on sell, products have a shelf life. So what happens if, for example, we've had distributors in the past where they order new products, they put them at the front of the shelf, they sell those new products, they never rotate stock, and they end up with stale stock. Whose responsibility is that? It's the distributor's responsibility. As a wholesaler, you don't want that responsibility. So, you've got to think practically, how does this business work? Where are the opportunities for something to go wrong? And you address those in the distribution agreement or the retailer agreement when you're wholesaling. So it's all, that's our focus when we're working with people in their businesses, is to really understand, practically speaking, what happens in your business. How does a customer find you? What are the kinds of things that have been challenges in the past or that have gone wrong? What have you seen go wrong in other similar businesses that you'd really appreciate avoiding? And the steps that people go through, how do you get money off people? What's your refund or cancellation process? All of that sort of thing. You've got to think through the practical way in which things happen, and then we address the different moving parts on the way through. So wholesaling is a lot of predicted forward planning, and it is trying to address those things with sufficient flexibility in your agreement. Now, this is the other thing with agreements. Just because you write an agreement and you sign it doesn't mean it's set in stone. It doesn't mean you can't change it. Like, if you and whoever you are collaborating with want to change something, that's okay. You just vary it in writing. It forms part of the agreement. It's not hard. We've had people say to us, but I'm really worried about that. That's not flexible enough for this particular situation. It's like, well, actually it is, because all you've got to do is agree that. We've also suggested provisions in contracts that protect someone's business, and they say, for example, the ability to apply interest to overdue payments. And they go, we never do that. Well, you don't have to, but if you end up with an overdue amount of 10 grand and you've got to take it to court, it could be 2 years before that decision actually gets handed down. And if you don't have a provision about charging interest in your contract, then you may not get paid any interest. Whereas 2 years worth of interest on 10 grand at 8%, it's worth recovering. So just because you have it in the agreement doesn't mean you have to enforce it. But if you need to enforce it, it's there. So it's understanding all those different bits and pieces of contracts. So I know I haven't answered everybody's questions, but I've tried to sort of give an overview covering most of the questions that were asked. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks so much. I do have 2 more questions. So the one is there in Australia a 10-day cooling off period? So if somebody pays for something, at the end of 10 days, can they just go, no thanks?
No. Short answer, no. Okay, so that cooling off period applies to a particular type of sale, which essentially is door-to-door sales. So door-to-door sales, those people who accost you in the supermarket, the little stands they get in the middle of the supermarket, and people come and try and grab you and want you to. Okay, so those types of sales, car sales, there's some very specific areas of sale that attract a cooling off period, and the rest, no cooling off period applies. So if you're concerned about whether or not cooling off applies to your product or service, you got to ask the question, you know, book an advice session, ask that question and a couple of other questions you need answered, and we can provide you with the, you know, the appropriate answer for your situation.
And then the last one is, so if they've agreed to take a payment plan option and they enter into an agreement with the payment plan provider and they stop paying those payments, because they can go into the bank and they can actually just turn off those payments. Yep. But then there's a cost to recovering it. So legally, I'm just not sure what we are able to do with that.
Okay, so we often write into people's terms and conditions, direct debit terms and conditions, but really what it is who your payment provider is. So for example, if eWay is a very popular payment provider in Australia, you can set up a ongoing subscription payment through them. You agree to certain terms and conditions. Now, I've seen both sides of this. So I had a client who got hoodwinked by Just Local. They are not a legitimate firm. Please don't play with them. So they did it on 12 monthly recurring, and it was like $1,500 every 12 months. And our client had cancelled everything and they got a debit twice more. And they've had to take it to court, but Just Local doesn't have, it's set up through a trust. You can't contact anyone, you can't find anyone. It's a false address on all of their records, all of that sort of stuff. So just if you're going to set up subscription terms and you're going to set up ongoing payment terms, the courts have decided that where it's for products or services, it may be a fixed period, but there's EmploySure. If you've ever heard of EmploySure, they are the poster child in this area because they got sued by the ACCC for unfair contract terms because their contracts used to say you've got a 5-year contract, and if you cancel it, you pay the 5 whole years, even if you don't take our products or our services in that 5 years. And the court said, no, that's not fair. Now, it went through a number of different appeals, and in the end, EmploySure was able to demonstrate that it was not strictly an unfair contract term. So they won in the end, but they lost huge amounts of money getting there. And I think part of the reason that they were sort of targeted for this is EmploySure was established by a lawyer. So the courts kind of reckon they should have known better. But what they were in one of the appeal processes, they were able to demonstrate that they actually did not make a profit until 2.5 years into the 5 years. So they changed their terms and conditions to essentially say you can cancel, but if you cancel, you've got to pay up to 3 years worth of the subscription. And the court said that's not unfair because you're entitled to, you know, make a profit. But they were not entitled to the balance of the end 2 years because they were unable to substantiate to the court that that was a reasonable compensation for the loss or damage they would have suffered for offering that service to that person and then having it cancelled early. So if you're in a direct debit relationship, what you've got to do is be able to demonstrate that the value of your service is provided in the front end, and so that any ongoing payments are just meeting what's already been, the value that's already been given in the front end. Because if it's not, and this is another one, Ashley and Martin, you know, the hair people. Okay, so Clinton, you or may not know Ashley and Martin, they do men's baldness products. So helping you regrow your hair. They were taken to court by the ACCC for unfair contract terms because they did the same thing. You sign up for 12 months, so you do 12-month course of treatment to grow back your hair, and this guy got 3 months in and said, I don't want to play anymore, I'm out, and I want, I don't want to pay anymore. And Ashley Martin sued him for the balance, and the court said, well, no, because what he's paying for is the services that you're delivering each time he comes each month. You're entitled to the equivalent of a cancellation fee or an administration fee or something like that, which they decided was, it was either, I think it was 20% of the value of the contract. But you're not entitled to any more. So you can't sue him for the balance of the whole contract. So just have an awareness of those sorts of things if you're doing a direct debit relationship. One of the businesses in the past, there used to be a math tutor one where they did it on finance, and you signed up and you ended up with a finance company for 5 years. So Zip Pay, Afterpay, any of those sort of payment services, they take the responsibility for the ongoing payments, not you. So as a retailer or a wholesaler or a product provider, you may be better at looking at one of those. They unfortunately only deal with products, not services. But one of those might be better than direct debit on a payment plan.
Yeah, thanks so much. I originally did that in the beginning. I'd set up payment plans for like a year, even though the course was only 8 weeks or whatever, to make it more feasible.
Yeah.
But then you'd have people do it and then leave.
Cancel.
And
Yep.
then, yeah, so now I try to get the payment plan for the length of the thing.
course.
Some
Yep.
people just change their minds and they don't want to carry on.
They still have to pay. So they've
Yeah.
entered into a contract and they are obliged to meet the contract terms.
You have to go chase that as well, which is
You do have to chase that. However, there is, and this is something else we write into payment terms, is that the full amount of the debt becomes due and owing as soon as there's any default.
Yeah.
Because we have had a client in the past who we wanted to put that in a contract for them, and they said, no. And then the person defaulted and they had like 120 grand outstanding, and it drip fed at $5,000 a month. And they should have been going to court once for 120 grand, but they were going to have to wait that 20-month period before they could do so.
Yeah, wow. And there is actually a service-based provider that I work with now called Procure It, and they actually do manage the entire loan over 6 months, and I get paid outright straight away. So it is a much better option.
Yep.
But I do like what you said over there about, and if anyone wants an introduction to Dylan from Procure It, I can introduce you. Not Dylan, something else, sorry. I'll get his name. But I do like the idea of a cancellation fee as well, and also maybe all the charges that are cured with that, because all the bookkeeping charges and all the lawyers' fees and all the other things as well. So I think that's really
so that's generally what we include in terms and conditions, that if you're paying off over time, all these things are included. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, thanks so much. Does anyone have like a must answer right now question, because we are over 2:05? We're at 2:05 at the moment for the live audience. If anyone has a must ask like right now, but I think Tara was asking to have a chat with you, Jeanette, in the box. So would it be okay if you maybe just put your email in there, Jeanette, and then, oh, there we go. You've put it in there.
So that's, we've got a really cool domain ending. So if you want to email me, that's the quickest and easiest email. And our website is just onyx.legal. And on the top of the website, on the left-hand side of the page, there is a make an appointment button if you want to make an appointment and have a chat.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, certainly is something to get right. And I love what you said about the lawyer, is about the lawyers and how they have bad days, because I didn't actually ever think I was going to win the one against the personal trainer, because it was my written contract. And this person just looked at this other woman and said, you can't just change your mind. Like, this woman's got 3 kids. You can't just do that. So I won, and I was all chuffed and proud of myself. But then a couple of years later, I worked for the Heal Yourself Expos, and they'd said to me that I was going to get $1,500 plus profit share. And then the person decided about 9 months later that they didn't want to do it anymore and refused to pay me anything. And I'd worked for like 9 months, and I went to court. I had all the evidence. I had she'd signed something, the bookkeeper, absolutely everything. Took it to the lawyers, took it to the court, and the day before they gave me the court date, they said to me, no, I was flying out for Master Plumbers Association. I was actually flying out. So I contacted them and I said, do I actually have to attend? And the lady said, you don't have to attend. You just have to make sure that you've submitted everything. So I said, I've submitted everything. She said, cool. Anyway, so when I finished flying the next day, I called the court straight away and they said, sorry, but the guy didn't think that it was a good example that you didn't show up.
Oh.
And I was flying to like a conference. That was the day I'd called in, asked, I had all my documents. Like I should have been, like I had all the proof in the world, and they just went, sorry, but he said you can reschedule. You can reschedule another time.
Oh, that's just
and go through the whole process again and all the money and everything. It was insane. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's really bad.
Yeah. So I thought I'd share that story because, they are people too. So I'll just say goodbye to the live audience. But if anybody does, sorry, not the live audience, the non-live audience, the people watching across YouTube and through our blog, if you want to join in live, you just join our VIP program. The links will be in the comments below. Once you become a VIP, you can get your questions answered all week long and live in our live weekly mastermind.